We are here again with updated audio settings for Warzone and Modern Warfare 3, this time for the Season 5 update, which I think has been pretty great by the way, although mostly just because of the addition to Superstore. But it is this addition to Superstore, along with hammering Rebirth Island generally, that has spurred on a refresh of the audio settings. For whatever reason, during the close quarters battles across Superstore and in Rebirth Island, I just couldn't consistently hear footsteps and their direction. All other audio was perfect, aside from super loud airstrikes probably, but these small areas with dense player counts really showed me something needed tweaking, which is why we're diving into the audio settings. And one of the most important places we need to go is straight to the audio mix. Now, if you do play on PC, you can do some extra tweaking and editing, such as with your equalization, but if you don't really want to touch that, or if you are on console like me, we've got to focus on our in-game settings. And straight away, something we want to focus on is the descriptions on the right-hand side here. All the different mixes are referring to dynamic range. And generally, we want a tighter dynamic range to enhance the quieter noises, since dynamic range essentially refers to the difference between the loudest and quietest sounds. By bringing them closer together and tighter, it means quiet noises like footsteps will appear louder. The negative to this is that many of the sounds and noises can then overlap with one another, since some of the things in the game are supposed to be quiet and others loud. So obviously there is a limit to how tight we want our dynamic range. Otherwise, in theory, the TV audio mix may be the best, since it has the tightest dynamic range. But if you ever tried to use this setting, you'll know that everything is competing, just everything sounds loud. Now recently I have been recommending Soundbar. It does have a pretty tight dynamic range and equalization, but the dynamic range is a little wider than the headphone settings. And that's great for most maps in most scenarios, because then you start to have that depth of audio. So you can decipher different noises from one another, so it becomes much clearer what's going on around you, and generally gives you a little bit more of a nicer experience. But like I say, those close quarters scenarios, something just wasn't clicking, and that may be because of the soundbar setting. So I do recommend going kind of back to basics with this and going with headphone bass boost. So it does give us a slightly tighter dynamic range, and another advantage is it does enhance those low end frequencies, so those bassy sounds, which quite often are things like footsteps. So in theory it should give us a kind of double whammy here. The quieter sounds like footsteps get enhanced, and the bassier sounds do as well. So if you do use headphones, I recommend going back to this. If you are on a different system, such as you're using a soundbar or kind of a cinema home theater setup, I'd just go straight for these preset audio mixes because they are actually very good for those. I mean, Call of Duty have won many awards for their audio. I mean, if you are focusing on footsteps, I bet you can't believe that, but for other realistic sounds and depth of sounds, yes, they have won awards. So if you use one of these audio mixes, you can absolutely appreciate that. Now, just before we get into the rest of the audio settings, if you're looking to unlock Modern Warfare 3 camos completely legitimately, or play in bot lobbies, get all the best schematics, or the brand new nuke skin, be sure to check out MWIII Cactus. They're the biggest and most reliable sellers with loads of new offerings for Modern Warfare 3 with completely safe and legitimate services. These guys have well over 10,000 verified reviews on Trustpilot, and be sure to use code SPRING for 5% off for a limited time only. Okay, now we're on to volumes. For master game volume, I actually recommend turning this down a little bit. I've gone to 70. Now, if you do want it louder, you can turn it up here, or for most people, you can control it on your headphones or headset, but I find leaving it on 100 can kind of distort some sounds. So just turn it down a little bit is my advice. Then for gameplay music volume, put this down to 0. For dialogue volume, I've gone for 30. This is the absolute loudest you want this, but you still do want it on a little bit. Some of the operators can shout some very useful things, whether that's an enemy putting down a claymore or throwing a grenade, or even the game telling you that someone's flying in above you. Effects volume, put it on 100. This is things like footsteps and doors being smashed open. Cinematic music volume, this really doesn't matter too much. You can turn it all the way off. I've just got it on 6. Just for a little bit of that theater. And then for war tracks, again, not super important. You can turn it off, but if you are playing with friends, it's kind of fun to have those war tracks on. Voice chat volume, that's absolutely fine on 50. Pretty subjective, and again, one of those things you can alter on your headset. The next important setting is proximity chat. This is one of those super fun settings that you can have a lot of fun with, you know, talking to people on enemy teams and things like that. A lot of the time though, it can just give your position away. So if you're really going for high kill games and wins, then I'd kind of recommend turning this off if you are actually in the game. For subtitles, that's kind of up to you. I've put mine back onto default so they only show up in the campaign. And that's because above here, we did have the dialogue volume up a little bit. So there's no real need to have subtitles on as well. If you do want to switch the dialogue all the way down, then I would recommend putting subtitles on. You still need that information. Now for mono audio, switch this off. This ensures that we have stereo audio essentially enabled, which is the thing that gives us left and right directional audio. So if you hear hear footsteps or gunfire from the left, it'll actually come up in your left ear. Reduced tinnitus sound, please put that on, it's just really annoying. And then of course war tracks and juggernaut music are up to you. For hitmarker sound effects, I personally love classic, but it is just a subjective choice. But tactically, I actually put it on none. If you think about all of the different audio in Call of Duty that competes with one another, so all of those different audio tracks, whether they're kill streaks, people talking, or whatever it is, sometimes the issue with picking out certain sounds is that those tracks are competing, like I say. So just adding another one into the mix isn't ideal. Anyway, that's everything for this video. Hopefully next time you're sprinting around Rebirth Island or Superstore, it does help you out. If you are looking to see enemies much easier this season as well, then why don't you join me over in this video for the very best graphics settings right now.